For me, the Mask of Darth Nihilus is the definitive imagery for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. When you think of this game, the thing you visualize first is likely to be Darth Nihilus, and not only that, he serves generally as the face of the game anyway when it comes to the marketing and whatnot. And it is an almost utterly unique item in Star Wars. Aside from one thing we'll get into a little bit later in this video, there is truly nothing like the Mask of Darth Nihilus anywhere else, and because of that it is extremely special, not only figuratively, but literally within the game too. When we defeat Darth Nihilus in Knights of the Old Republic 2, we can retrieve his mask, but weirdly enough we can't actually wear it. You'll be able to see it in your inventory, but it will just be a unequipable item, if that's even a word. It has its own description and it gives you benefits. When you pick it up, it will tell you that your maximum force powers have increased, and it will do just that. It will increase your connection to the Force. And that kind of sums up how powerful this singular item is. It literally increases you, the Jedi Exile's connection to the Force. But with that said, it not being a wearable item is kind of interesting, because we carry this thing around, it is the face of the franchise, and yet when we finally acquire it, it's unusable. It's nothing but a gimmick item that sits in your inventory. So first and foremost, what is the Mask of Darth Nihilus? Well, it's actually kind of a mystery within Star Wars lore, especially its origin, much like Nihilus himself, really. Now, this is my own little personal fan theory, but I personally like to believe that it's actually his skull, and maybe that's a bit morbid, but I like to believe that when he yanked his spirit from his body, it created a physical manifestation that became like a Star Wars version of a Horcrux, which his mask kind of is anyway, and this physical manifestation kind of represented his body, his skull, and that's why he wears it. But you know, that's just a silly fan theory. But because of the general lack of information around it, I think we can assume that it's maybe handcrafted or he built it in some way, who knows. But there is actually a really interesting bit of lore that was kind of taken away from the Star Wars universe because it was cut at the last minute for some unknown reason. But it was meant to be in the Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide, and the author for it, Abel G. Penner, I've probably butchered his name, I'm so sorry, mentioned that the paragraph that was cut from the game was going to suggest that Nihilus's mask was actually a death mask of Hendayn make. But that just adds more mystery, doesn't it? Because what is a Hendayn death mask? Well, first and foremost, the Hendayans are a species, and while I don't think we've actually seen one, they created extremely special masks. They were almost ceremonial in a way, and when the mask was created and placed upon the face, it would literally mold itself to their skin and their skull. Now, the only time we have ever seen one of these masks literally in Star Wars lore, if I recall rightly, was in one of the essential guides or the atlases, and it was seen on a character called Cruella who existed around the time of Luke Skywalker. And it did look quite different to Darth Nihilus' mask, that is true, but with that aside, the Hendayn death mask was solely unique, because it wasn't just a mask. It didn't just serve as a piece of protection or something that looked cool or whatnot, because somehow in some way, we don't know the details, but after the mask had molded to the skull of the wearer, it actually stored their memories. It would literally become a physical memory bank for its user. And when the mask was passed on through generations or family, or it was found, the person who wore the mask would potentially be able to acquire the memories of those that came before. Now, of course, they wouldn't be taken over or possessed or anything like that. It wasn't spiritual in a Sith sense, but they did get into the mind of whoever wore it. And I find it very interesting that this, of all the items he could have chosen, is the one that Darth Nihilus decided to pour his spirit into. An item that literally stores memories and stores thoughts. Now, generally the whole death mask thing is just a theory based on what a writer intended to do with it, but the idea that it stores memories kind of supports some of the other stories that surround the mask post Knights of the Old Republic 2, and those stories kind of support the idea that it may have been a death mask by design, even though that little bit of information was cut from the campaign guide. So of course, at the end of Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Mask of Nihilus is taken from his robes by Visas Marsh. She picks it up and gives it to the Jedi Exile. It then becomes a miscellaneous item, a thing that we can't wear, but a thing that grants us increased connection to the Force, which is kind of funny actually, considering he's the death of the Force. But anyway, we know that Mitra Surik didn't keep the mask, but we also know that she didn't destroy it either, which probably would have been the best thing to do if she could have. However, as time passed throughout the Star Wars universe, we learned that the mask actually became kind of mythological. It became legendary in its own way. And we know that it hopped between owners because rumours and information spread about its capabilities. It was said that the Mask of Darth Nihilus was so powerful that somebody who wasn't touched by the Force, somebody who couldn't even feel it, could instantly gain the Force capability of a Jedi apprentice. And if an actual Jedi Knight or a Jedi Master were to wear it, or a Sith, their powers would increase tenfold. But of course, the kind of hunger for power that the mask had eventually touched the wearer, and they would become consumed by the darkness that the mask kind of emitted. And I think that this idea isn't as random as you may think. I think it's really easy to think, well, the item's unbelievably powerful, it was connected to an ancient Sith Lord, and it just gives them that power because... But I actually think this information was actually connected to the Hendayn Death Mask idea that was ultimately scrapped. Now this again is just a theory on my part, but with the idea of it being a death mask and being a mask that transfers memories, I believe it literally transferred the memories and thus the understanding of the Force that Darth Nihilus had. It doesn't necessarily gift somebody the power of the Force, but it instantly opens up their mind to the understanding of it, because Darth Nihilus's memories are being placed into their skull. And I personally think this would have been a wonderful way to maybe incorporate the Mask of Darth Nihilus into some kind of future story. It was a way for Darth Nihilus to live on through something else, instead of just being another typical Sith spirit that comes back and wants revenge and whatnot. Instead, his mask literally imprints his thoughts, his memories, his past into somebody else. And they are then free to become whoever they wish to be, but with all of these memories inside of them. I think that sounds awesome. Now, in case you're wondering what happened to Darth Nihilus's mask, it actually found its way onto a planet called Volok, and it was on a downed ship in a cave that looked conveniently like the Ebon Hawk, but wasn't, called the Nashuaga, and it was retrieved by a bunch of spacers for a mini-adventure in a sourcebook. But the Mask of Darth Nihilus generally didn't really appear in any more stories beyond the games, but for me, personally, the idea that it is a Hendayn Death Mask by design makes the Mask of Darth Nihilus that much more special. There are so many Sith artifacts in the Star Wars universe that are just brimming with evil, or the spirit of a Sith Lord trapped alongside it, whereas this is actually the very soul of Darth Nihilus, not the literal spirit, but the very memories that kind of consumed him into becoming him. And they are then trapped within this thing, just waiting to be passed down to somebody else to maybe cause them trauma. And I find this concept to be fascinating because it is totally different from all of the other Sith lore, and I really wish they kept it in the campaign guide, but alas, it is something that I think could be the center point for a future Star Wars story. Without going all the way back to Knights of the Old Republic 2 and messing up the story of Darth Nihilus and whatnot, the Mask of Darth Nihilus, what it actually represents, could be a great starting point for a new story that has a connection to him. Which is, in my opinion, what they should have done in the Old Republic, but instead they went with the whole Nirot and Cult of Darth Nihilus thing, but I'd love to know what you think about the Hendayn Death Mask concept. Do you think the idea of Nihilus's memories being stored into the mask then passed down to the next user being the right way to go with it, or do you think they should have done something a little bit different? Let me know down in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps me out a great deal, and if you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing to join the biggest growing Knights of the Old Republic community on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, may the Force be with you. Always.